Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's romance, which lasted over 20 years, has ended, and fans are shocked by how it came to an end. From the outside, it appeared like they were untouchable two stars who had triumphed over the challenges of Hollywood and fame, all smiles and passionate praises. The fairy story ended when Nicole filed for a divorce, and the reality was considerably more convoluted than anyone had anticipated. This became crystal evident as she stepped into the limelight. Instead of quiet, a storm broke out. Nicole reacted with silent power, allowing her deeds to convey more than words, while Keith stormed the stage with unguarded displays that appeared to reveal concealed anguish. What unfolded was more than the dissolution of a marriage. It was a confrontation between love, celebrity, sacrifice, and the hidden struggles that the spotlight could never illuminate. If you find stories like this captivating, be sure to give it a like, subscribe, and enable notifications so you won't miss the next in-depth exploration. In order to grasp the final outcome, one must retrace their steps to the very beginning. Nicole Kidman's early life and rise to fame in Hollywood. Before she became a globally renowned actress, Nicole Kidman was a timid young girl searching for her voice. Nicole had a very contrasted childhood, being born in Honolulu in 1967 to Australian parents who were working overseas. While her mother fostered imagination and nurturing, her father, a psychologist and biochemist, provided order and logic to the home. By the time Nicole and her family got back to Sydney, her personality had already begun to take shape. And it wasn't in the way anyone would have predicted for an aspiring actress. Nicole was quite timid and lacked self-assurance. When her name was called on in class, her teachers said she would blush so badly that she would appear to freeze. She was afraid of public speaking. However, her vivid imagination more than compensated for her lack of self-assurance. Ballet, acting workshop, and eventually community theater groups provided her with an outlet for feelings she had trouble putting into words. She found an outlet for her timidity in acting, where she could play any role. Her innate skill was obvious by the time she was a teenager. In the early 2000s, Nicole made the most of her opportunities as the Australian film and television industry began to blossom. At the tender age of 16, she had already made appearances in commercials and TV movies when she landed the lead role in the cult hit BMX Bandits. Hollywood took notice of her for that job and others like it due to her towering stature, flawless complexion, and expressive eyes. Soon enough, Nicole found herself thrown into a world she had only ever fantasized about, the American film industry. She still faced the difficulties of celebrity, even after her achievement. The once terrified teenage actress was now blending vulnerability with ambition on the world's largest stages. Both her professional and personal life decisions would be influenced by her vulnerability. Despite the fact that Nicole was being discovered by audiences as an exceptionally talented actress with boundless potential, she continued to seek love, family, and a place she genuinely belonged in. In the process of her quest, she entered into a relationship that would leave her with decades of wounds, as well as fame and heartache. However, her life had already been irrevocably altered by another guy before Keith Urban came into it. Nicole Kidman's career was booming by the late 80s, when she and Tom Cruise tied the knot. Her breathtaking performances caught the attention of Hollywood. And it was during this time that she met Tom Cruise, one of the world's biggest stars. They hit it off right away, and in 1990 Nicole and Tom were married, cementing their status as one of the world's most famous couples. They were the stuff of tabloid dreams. They appeared to be unstoppable, youthful, and stunning. Beside one of Hollywood's most bankable stars, Nicole felt like she had stepped into a dream. She had grown up timid and self-conscious. However, there was a far more difficult truth lurking beneath the flawless exterior. The contentious religion of Scientology, to which Tom was ardently committed, soon started to dominate their marriage. This cloud weighed heavily on Nicole, although she seldom discussed it directly. Rumors and subsequent writings hinted that their relationship was strained due to the demands of the faith and the restrictions it imposed. Their 2001 breakup, though, was the most painful part. After their divorce, Tom continued to live with Nicole's children, Isabella and Connor, whom they had adopted jointly. Nicole rarely spoke about it publicly, but a period of estrangement from them had a profound impact on her. As has been widely reported in the media, a woman's heart broke at the thought of being apart from her family and the security they provided. Not only was Nicole's marriage to Tom broken, but it was also a traumatic event that changed her life. Even though the wounds were visible, she maintained an air of poise in public, rarely letting her suffering show. Love, family, and perseverance were core values for her throughout those years. As fate would have it, Nicole met Keith Urban at a time when she was hell, bent on reuniting with her broken family and the home she had always imagined. Their irresistible connection, and her clinging to it, were both shaped by the scars she carried from her past. Keith Lionel Urban's upbringing and struggles were completely different from Nicole's. Keith relocated to Queensland, Australia, with his family from Whangarei, New Zealand, in 1967 when he was quite young. Keith inherited his father Bob's love of country music. Bob was a convenience store operator. He began playing guitar at the tender age of 6 and quickly found himself performing at intimate local events. In a country that wasn't exactly popular in Australia, Keith found solace and self-expression via music. But there were times when things were rough at home. According to reports, Keith's early restlessness was caused by financial hardships and family tensions. Not only did music help him heal, but it also gave him hope for the future. Even as a teenager, he was performing in pubs and talent events, building a reputation as the mysterious foreigner with obvious skills. Keith channeled his energy into music after dropping out of college. No contingency plan was in place. That risk paid off in the end. After toiling away for a while, Keith finally broke through in 1999 with his self-titled American debut album, which catapulted him to stardom in the country music industry. He became an instant sensation thanks to his disheveled hair, intense gaze, and unrefined guitar abilities. But the monsters that came with celebrity were not without their own peculiarities. Keith started dabbling in booze and other dangerous substances when he was in his 20s. It became increasingly difficult for him to rein in those behaviors as his fame grew. His success only made things worse, not better. Keith had a history of drug and alcohol abuse when he met Nicole in 2005. Even though he fought wars that the audience never witnessed, he was electrifying on stage. His addictions plagued him with the persistent dread that they may destroy his professional life, personal connections, and future prospects. Part of what attracted Nicole to him was his openness and honesty. She saw a gifted musician and a man whose life was out of whack due to the excessive demands of the outside world. They were both familiar with suffering. It was as if fate had brought them together, two broken spirits seeking solace in one another. When their paths crossed, their passionate yet vulnerable connection would ultimately lead to their tragic breakup. As time would show, the 2005 film How Nicole and Keith Met found Nicole Kidman well on her way to re-establishing her life following her terrible breakup with Tom Cruise. A friendly reminder to hit like and subscribe if you're enjoying the tale. She was one of the most revered actresses in Hollywood, having earned an Oscar for her role in The Hours. She yearned for stability, love, and a second opportunity at the family she believed she had lost beneath the surface of her accolades and magazine covers. At the same time, Keith Urban was moving in the opposite direction. In Nashville, he was quickly rising to fame thanks to his guitar-driven performances and sincere melodies. But he still worried that his sobriety issues could derail his life's progress, even as the limelight intensified. He and Nicole were both at a crossroads in their lives when they were eventually brought together by fate. The G-Day USA Gala, held in Los Angeles in January 2005 to honor Australians who had achieved great success in the United States, was the setting for that tragic meeting. One of the night's bright spots was Nicole, who exuded composure and elegance. Everyone was talking about Keith, the country musician, because of his subtle charisma and growing stardom. Nicole later confessed that she wasn't certain he was interested when they were introduced. Despite taking her number, he remained quiet and polite for months. What may have been the beginning of the end turned into a game of waiting. Something clicked the second Keith extended his hand. Their romance progressed swiftly after that. They were seen together in public for the first time in May. And by year's end, Nicole was bragging about how he had swept her off her feet. Keith was a radical departure from her previous experiences. Unlike Tom Cruise, who was reserved, controlled, and polished, Keith came out as passionate, unfiltered, and raw. Maybe Nicole was attracted to him precisely because he was flawed. He was an embodiment of liberty and genuineness in her eyes. As evidence that he had arrived, in life and in music, she embodied for Keith the qualities of refinement, steadiness, and legitimacy. They both knew by the end of 2005, and the press was watching them closely too, that this was no ordinary romance. Tragically, two lives collided as two broken spirits, each hoping to find salvation in the other, bringing their worlds crashing down. They were prepared to finally tie the knot by the middle of 2006. If their meeting seemed predetermined, their wedding in The Wedding of the Golden Couple. So 2006 appeared straight out of a fairy tale. The stunning Cardinal Soretti Memorial Chapel on Manly Peninsula in Sydney was the site of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's wedding on June 25, 2006. Attendees included members of the royal family, country music artists, and close relatives, making the celebration both extravagant and intimate. By candlelight, Nicole entered the cathedral, her Balenciaga gown draping over her head in a stunning veil. According to others there, she fought back tears as she walked down the aisle. At the reception, Keith serenaded her with his guitar, his distinctive long hair, and it was the perfect personal touch. A touch that won over everyone's hearts. The media saw it as the perfect fairy tale ending, the merging of two worlds, Hollywood glitz and country music grit. The images that were published in magazines all over the world bolstered the story. Nicole had discovered a guy who loved her, no matter what, and Keith had found salvation with the help of a highly acclaimed actress. They had finally arrived at the Hollywood and Nashville power couple. Their marriage was more than simply another famous romance for their devoted admirers. True love could overcome all odds, and it proved that two wounded souls could find solace in one another's company. It seems like Nicole had finally found peace after the trauma of her former marriage's dissolution and the anguish of being apart from her children. After overcoming addiction and self-doubt, Keith finally looked to have found stability. To be sure, fairy tales don't last forever. Difficulties were simmering beneath the surface of the music and candles. Their wedded joy was tragically interrupted when Keith checked himself into rehab for alcohol consumption just 4 months after the wedding. This was the first public fracture in their carefully constructed story. Their wedding, however, was a sign of optimism and rebirth at that very moment. Two stars, both molded by adversity, had vowed to progress side by side. Everyone else put their faith in them, and maybe they did the same with the fairy tale. A wonderful beginning isn't safe from the tests that reality inevitably throws at it. Rehab and early difficulties. Nicole and Keith's marriage began to show signs of strain just 4 months after their idyllic honeymoon. If Keith wanted to get sober, he could have checked himself into a rehabilitation center in October 2006. Such news so soon after the wedding might have been catastrophic for many couples. It was a challenge to her loyalty, but Nicole was willing to meet it head-on. The timing was really brutal. The media jumped on the story just as Nicole was finishing up the thank you notes from the wedding. Their picture as the ideal, golden couple was suddenly recast into a more sinister one. The press portrayed Keith as a dangerous time bomb and Nicole as a bride who may have unwittingly brought disorder into her marriage. What she would not do, though, was allow her marriage to be defined by external factors. Instead, she was there for him, paying him visits while he was in treatment and opting to keep their private battle out of the spotlight. After the fact, Keith said that Nicole had saved his life that day. He had described her as an anchor because of her constant support. Her presence was about more than love. It was for survival, in his opinion. Nevertheless, those on the inside hinted at a more nuanced truth. When Nicole's marriage to Tom Cruise failed, she dove headfirst into playing the role of healer for Keith. She wanted to show herself that she could keep a family together this time, not merely out of love. But the general population perceived nothing but tenacity. Their narrative appeared even more inspiring to their supporters, proving that love could endure any challenge. Still, an unsettling pattern was taking shape behind the scenes. Throughout their marriage, Nicole's responsibilities as protector and caretaker took center stage, while Keith bore the weight of constantly having to save himself. For some time, it was effective. They didn't realize it at the time, but there was a consequence to that imbalance that would become clear over time. At least for the time being, though. They have come out of the crisis with a stronger public image and are prepared to face the world as a team. Then, sooner rather than later, they would face even more formidable obstacles in their lives, such as juggling jobs, becoming parents, and the relentless scrutiny of celebrity. Balancing work and family life, the pair put in a lot of time and effort to get back on their feet in the years after Keith's stay in rehab. On the surface, they appeared to be invincible. Nicole maintained her dominance in Hollywood, starring in both commercial successes like Australia and critically acclaimed indie films like Rabbit Hole. With Grammys under his belt and venues around the world sold out, Keith solidified his position as one of country music's top artists. Their romance appeared more robust than before in public. Keith frequently gushed over Nicole in interviews, occasionally visibly moved. Nicole said he had brought her back to life, and their electric chemistry on the red carpet and at award ceremonies suggested their relationship had only grown stronger. The pressures of fame, however, were wearing thin beneath that flawless exterior. The distance was the initial obstacle. Long periods of separation were inevitable when Nicole began filming across the globe and Keith became a continual touring musician. Insiders whispered that their schedules clashed more often than they disclosed, despite their attempts to establish regulations such as never being separated for more than a few weeks. Nicole, who still felt the effects of the trauma of being apart from her adopted children from her relationship with Tom Cruise, lived in constant terror of being apart from her family. After the couple's children, Sunday Rose 2008 and Faith Margaret 2010 were born, Nicole dove headfirst into parenthood. She clung tenaciously to the security of her home life and was hell-bent on learning from her mistakes. Although Keith loved his children very much, he struggled with the change. Being a parent was a lot of work, especially when combined with the unpredictable lifestyle of a touring musician. They occasionally clashed because Keith preferred spontaneity while Nicole preferred organization. But in public, they were able to portray themselves as a family that triumphed against all difficulties, a remedy for the cynicism that permeates Hollywood. Famous images of their relationship emerged of Keith assisting with passengers' bags as Nicole held the girls at airports. Their outward display of unity belied the fact that, according to those on the inside, they were slowly crumbling under the weight of the demands of fame, family, and personal hardships. The outside world had no idea that their marriage was becoming an ongoing balancing act between two extremes: separation and intimacy, responsibility and independence, order and disorder. Even though everyone thought they were impregnable, behind the scenes tensions were building. In case you haven't subscribed yet, you won't want to miss the next installment of Living the Fairy Tale in Public, Struggling in Private. Over the course of the late 2000s and into the 2010s, Nicole and Keith painstakingly constructed an image that eventually eclipsed them. Photo ops, moving speeches, and red carpet appearances portrayed them as a model of Hollywood's uncommonly long, lasting love. The interviewers saw them as living proof that true marriages could triumph with infidelity, stardom, and physical separation. While Keith frequently sobbed in appreciation during award ceremony presentations, Nicole frequently remarked that Keith had revitalized her. Their love story served as a beacon of hope for their devoted supporters. A distinct reality, however, was playing out in the shadows of the paparazzi. Their shared characteristics were now causing them to drift apart. Because of her experiences with loss, Nicole yearned for a more secure and predictable life. Being a naturally restless person, Keith yearned for spontaneity and freedom. Rather from being dramatic, their conflicts were subtle, underlying tensions that gradually diminished their closeness to one another. Rumor has it that Keith hated being seen as the helpless one, and Nicole felt that she was carrying the emotional burden of the marriage on occasion. She was strong, and he respected that, but it was also intimidating at times. Although she adored his openness, she was terrified it may destroy everything they had worked for. One of them wanted tranquility, while the other wanted control, thus their dynamic was always shifting. These differences were further emphasized throughout parenting. Nicole sought order and predictability so that she could protect her girls from the wild ride that is fame. Keith portrayed the carefree, indulgent, and entertaining parent. Their daughters loved both of their parents very much, but sources close to the family said that Keith felt chastised and Nicole felt undermined at times. And yet, nobody paid attention. They continued to be the perfect pair in interviews, on stage, and at premieres. With each embrace, smile, and proclamation of love, the image was solidified. Fairy tales are more fun to act out than to actually live out, though, as many times before. And by the middle of the 2010s, those subtle fissures were getting increasingly obvious. The marriage of Nicole and Keith was the subject of increasing rumors and denials from the middle of the 2010s until 2024. The schedule conflicts, Keith's nightlife, and Nicole's intensity were just a few of the topics covered by the tabloids. Some anonymous sources suggested that the couple had argued, and paparazzi photos showed Nicole at events without Keith, or Keith on tour without his wedding band. The stories frequently depicted a sense of separation between them, but every time the couple reacted with flawless harmony. Nicole assured journalists, "We've never been stronger," maintaining an unwavering demeanor that put their minds at ease. In keeping with those feelings, Keith often called Susan his rock and his soulmate. They held hands closely on red carpets and smiled for the cameras as if to disprove the headlines. No one believed the claims for a long time. A lot of their admirers took them at their word because they wanted to believe in what they said. A lot of work went into those grins though, as those closest to the pair could tell. According to friends, Nicole appeared exhausted from constantly being the rock, while Keith resented being thought of as a helpless victim. Mindful adjustments were also picked up by observers. Nicole's naturally charming smiles started to appear more staged. Although heartfelt, Keith's public displays of affection occasionally came across as scripted rather than genuine. It wasn't that their love was insincere, rather, they were exerting increasing amounts of effort to maintain the pretense. They refused to let go of the storybook image, no matter how much suspicion arose. A peck on the shoulder, a whispered word into someone's ear, or a shared giggle at a premiere. Any public gesture like this became mythological. However, their inner turmoil was becoming increasingly apparent behind closed doors, and the effort required to keep up appearances was wearing them down. It was 2023 or 2024 when the rumors started flying. News accounts said they were leading separate lives, and pictures of them at gatherings alone bolstered that theory. Despite this, the pair remained steadfast in their belief that they were one. Even the most meticulously constructed image has an expiration date, as the world would discover all too quickly. Even by 2025, no one could deny the reality. The divorce of 2025, the long simmering rumors were ultimately confirmed in September 2025. After nearly 20 years of marriage, Nicole Kidman officially ended it with a divorce filing in Davidson County, Tennessee. Underneath those brief words, irreconcilable differences, was the weight of over 2 decades of love, sacrifice, and silent battle. The papers were plain, almost clinical. The couple had reportedly been living apart prior to the filing, which formally ended their marriage of 19 years, as reported by People. This revelation further shocked admirers who had considered them as Hollywood's golden couple, proof that the split had been secretly developing for a long time before it became official. According to People.com, this was a really difficult choice for Nicole. The choice had apparently consumed her for months, as she struggled to reconcile her unwavering devotion to her family with her need to ensure her own safety. She was a strong-willed woman who was devastated to find she couldn't be a caregiver and a partner anymore, according to her friends. She has been Keith's rock for a long time, acting as stabilizer and anchor. However, she ultimately opted for self-preservation rather than perpetuating a pattern that exhausted her. Practical details were also disclosed in the divorce papers. Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret's mother, Nicole, sought primary residential custody, and their father, Keith, was asked to have joint decision-making power. It was widely known that Keith's touring schedule made it difficult for him to be a day-to-day father, while Nicole's life revolved around the daughters. This arrangement mirrored that. Importantly, Nicole and Keith both declined to pay child or spousal support, indicating that they had always kept their money separate and didn't want to benefit from each other's success. The emotional consequence was everything but peaceful. Even with the papers appearing calm and methodical, global gasps accompanied the announcement. The disillusionment was felt by fans who had looked to their marriage as evidence that true love could endure celebrity. The tabloids did not hesitate to portray the breakup as tragic, painting Nicole as a lady who had finally had enough and Keith as an artist tortured by inner turmoil. Keith would respond in a rather unsubtle manner if Nicole's filing had been thoughtful and controlled. He turned a concert into an honest public reckoning, when, days later, he stepped onto the stage ringless. Plus, his music finally broke through the noise that official statements had been making. In Pennsylvania, Keith Urban made his most recent stop on his High and Alive world tour, just days after the news of his divorce surfaced. Onstage, he confessed his feelings. But this wasn't your average country set. Instead, it became an unvarnished look at a man coping with grief as it happened. Fans knew this performance would be different the second he showed up without his wedding ring. Yes, they were correct. The most notable incident occurred during his 2004 breakup song, "You'll Think of Me." On that particular night, he sang a scathing rendition of the song's lyrics, "Take your unreasonable reasons." Videos of his performance went viral online, and many people took it as a jab at Nicole and her divorce. The modifications he made to his repertoire were even more indicative. Yahoo! Entertainment reports that Keith omitted the 2016 single, The Fighter, which many assumed was influenced by Nicole, and which he frequently sang when thinking about her. People began to wonder if Keith was trying to change his musical history to reflect the breakup of his marriage, because of the missing verse and the changed lyrics. Although Keith wasn't dropping songs totally that night, the way he selected the lineup generated discussion, according to TMZ's coverage of the show. It wasn't just another show, regardless of whether fans interpreted it as bitterness or catharsis. Despite the wrath, there were also beautiful moments. Heart Like a Hometown featured Keith with his daughters, serving as a visual reminder that family was still important to him, despite the breakdown of his marriage. For those in attendance, it was clearly more than just a concert. It had elements of a therapy session, a confessional, and a cultural spectacle. The internet analyzed every word choice and setlist alteration made by Keith, further solidifying the notion that his music had evolved into the most exposing statement of all. While Keith's reaction to the divorce unfolded under the bright lights of a stadium, Nicole Kidman took a decidedly different approach. She opted for quiet protest and understated movements to convey her message rather than rewriting songs or making big demonstrations of fury. Nicole made an appearance at a film festival ringless only a few weeks following the filing. Despite her composure and graceful attire, her expression betrayed a subtle melancholy that her poise and elegance could not obliterate. Nicole dealt with her grief in this way quietly, without letting her emotions show. Right away, her attention turned to Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, her daughters. While they strolled hand in hand around Nashville, the paparazzi caught her protective body language, which revealed her priorities. She was so adamant about protecting her girls from the instability brought on by the divorce that she retreated into family life, according to her friends. Feelings from Nicole's history resurfaced in this very moment. Isabella and Connor, her adoptive children, and she had been alienated from each other ever since her divorce from Tom Cruise. Repetition of past mistakes was something she would not abide this time. Apparently, she wanted to make sure Sunday and Faith were stable while their marriage collapsed, so she filed for primary custody, according to reports. At work, Nicole refocused on the one thing over which she had some measure of control: her job. Despite changes in her personal life, her work flourished, and she attended industry events with her customary level of professionalism. They dealt with bereavement in very different ways, and this was emphasized by the difference between her public persona and Keith's confessions on stage. The power of Nicole's quiet grew independently of her words. She had a quiet strength that Keith's songs screamed. She could have avoided changing the lyrics or making public statements. She made it plain that she was not harboring resentment, but rather was resolving her issues and looking ahead to a happier life with her girls. Professional success and inner calm. That silent power may have been more powerful than any melody, in many respects. The verdict: Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's narrative isn't merely about their broken marriage. It's also about the lessons learned from that experience. They were a symbol of love overcoming fame, distance, and addiction for nearly 20 years, bearing the weight of being Nashville's and Hollywood's golden pair. It appeared for quite some time that they had accomplished the seemingly impossible. Their prior hurts shaped them, and they tried to heal each other while still carrying their own scars. This was hidden beneath all the smiles and red carpet moments. After her first marriage ended in the tragic loss of her children, Nicole yearned for a life of stability. Addiction and restlessness had weighed Keith down, and he yearned for independence. The love they shared was genuine, but so were the inconsistencies between them, and they eventually became too much to handle. Although the term irreconcilable differences was used in the divorce paperwork, the actual situation was considerably more intricate. Their marriage was dissolved not due to a single scandal or argument. The years of inequality, sacrifice, and covert talks culminated in a flashpoint. The story is captivating because of the disparity in their responses to the collapse, which in turn highlights the collapse itself. Keith channeled his pain into his music, allowing the audience to feel his anguish as he performed. In contrast, Nicole's response was one of quiet strength. She kept her attention on her girls and continued to face the future with grace. It was a bittersweet ending for their followers when their marriage ended. It showed that no love story is flawless, but it also showed that famous people are just like the rest of us, flawed. They share common battles behind the scenes, including love, sorrow, and finding equilibrium. The most important thing is that it's not about being perfect, as Nicole once stated. For nearly 20 years, she and Keith exemplified the importance of consistently turning up. However, there are instances when simply being present is insufficient. Even the most heartfelt love stories might conclude with a subtle realization that love, no matter how profound, can't guarantee eternal happiness. Is their story something you can get behind? Post a comment telling us. To make sure you don't miss our next in-depth exploration, subscribe and press the bell button if you like this video.